Okay, you're ready to go.
Right. Would like to call to order the meeting of the Personnel and Administration Committee for Thursday, October 19th, 2023. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderman Aldridge,
Present.
President Green,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 3 present. You have a quorum.
Quorum being present, I'll entertain an approval of the minutes from Monday, October 9th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderman Aldridge,
Aye.
President Green,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 3 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion on the approval of the minutes from Monday, October 9th. So for today's committee discussion, we have a follow-up discussion on multi-graph printing process. And we had previously charged Christine Ingracia to work with the clerk and with our financial analyst, Ryan Coleman, to come back with us on kind of a proposal for this. So I wanted to turn it over to Christine to present, and Ryan is here as well to kind of talk from a financial point of view.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for letting me come and present today. I think we had mentioned before there was a line item in the current fiscal year's budget in under internal services for $114,000. So that will be for mailing with Multigraph, which amounts to $7,600 per alderperson. And then we have a budget line item each year with Multigraph that they provide for every city department. That's about $20,000 or $1,300 per alderperson. And so I worked with our financial analyst, Ryan Coleman, and the assistant clerk, Tracy Billups, to come up with a form that elected officials will use with their staff to submit a request to print or mail something through Multigraph. Tracy or one of the other clerks will then get a bid from Multigraph, ensure that alderperson has enough money in their account to mail or print. And then Ryan Coleman created a spreadsheet, which I think he's going to speak to, which will track the amount of money each alderperson is using to make sure that they know how much they have available to them as the fiscal year progresses. I'm happy to take questions. I don't have access to the personnel folder, so I'm not sure if either of those forms was uploaded. I do have them available if you would like to look at them.
Would you be able to share your screen?
Yeah, I will try to do that right now. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the form that we created that the clerk did approve that alderpersons or their staff can submit to Tracy or one of the clerks to do printing, just to make sure that we're able to understand how much the cost will be before the project gets submitted, and that we're able to track for ensuring that we know how much money is in everyone's account. And Ryan Coleman has access to the spreadsheet that will track the amounts.
There are any questions from members of the committee? Alderman Cone.
Thank you, Madam President. So just to be clear, Christine, is this, can you maybe like walk through a little bit about how these are going to be tracked? I know you said who's going to be tracking it, but how?
Sure. So the form will get submitted to Tracy. If Tracy's not there, it will either be the clerk or Sharita. So then the bid will be obtained from Multigraph, so you know how much the mailing or printing project will cost. The alderperson will sign off on that amount, and there will be certain people who have access to be able to track the money in the spreadsheet that Ryan will share. So the amounts I mentioned, the about $7,000 for mailing and about $1,300 for printing will be in the spreadsheet, and the amounts will be reduced by each project as the fiscal year moves forward. And that's how we'll make sure we track. So you will have the ability to see how much you're spending.
Okay, and does this include the Good Neighbor Guides?
There was no specific money set aside for Good Neighbor Guides. The Multigraph just usually prints them for alderpersons. And so each year they give us around $20,000 of a budget. And that $20,000 this year is split evenly between each elected official for any printing and mailing they would like to do.
Okay, so this is the budget that Multigraph usually uses for Good Neighbor Guides that we're now splitting up for postage and printing? Or
Only
this is,
the mailing is $114,000 under the line item budget of internal services. And that is something that we have never had before. That is in lieu of the stamps that were typically purchased. So instead of buying actual stamps, we will be using the much more inexpensive and quicker way of utilizing Multigraph to send mailings out. And then Multigraph gives the Board of Aldermen a budget each year, just like they do each city department for printing services.
but is that separate from what's on the spreadsheet? Or,
No, they always give us $20,000 total for all the printing needs that the board has.
okay,
One thing that will be a cost reducer this year is that we were able to determine when we were figuring out how to organize this and looking at the budget that we spent money on last year with Multigraph, and they've been charging us to print the city journals. And that is a function of the registrar's office. And so I've worked with the supply commissioner to make sure that we're no longer charged for those things. We did also set aside a little bit of money to make sure that we can pay for other printing, like business cards and some things that we need generally, and resolution and folder printing and things like that.
yeah, so I've got a whole bunch of like questions here because so we've got, like in the past, we would be able to use like note cards, like it's on cardstock, and if we wanted to send out thank you notes or congratulatory notes to people, is that something that would now, because that used to just come out of the Board of Aldermen budget, it didn't come out of like an aldermanic expense account or anything of that nature, so that's now something that would, or are we still?
In recent past, the board has not had its separate line item under its own budget for printing. Multigraph has done all of that printing. So this now, there's a couple of $1,000s set aside for things that are more general, such as the items you mentioned. And then the remainder of the $20,000, or the rest, which is $20,000, is set aside for the individual alder people to be able to choose what they would like to print each year.
Right. So, but I'm just trying to understand where are we distinguishing between what does the alder person, pay for and what comes out of the general budget for the board as a whole?
I think that's probably a smart conversation for the electeds here to have today to make sure that you have an understanding of what you think should be provided by the board. Like, for example, resolution folders and resolutions have. I think you could make an argument that some other people never
use more. Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a decision that would be smart for you all to take under consideration today. I mean, I think there's a balance, right? Like, you don't want to, there are some things that the board should probably just provide as a courtesy, as a function of your job. But there is definitely, it seems to be an imbalance in some of the printing and mailing that hasn't been addressed before. And so some of the officials, like one of the things we've done is move to electronic letterhead. I know myself, when I left office earlier this year, I had letterhead that was still left over from when I was first elected in 2013. So printing things like that probably just doesn't make sense anymore. If we can use electronic letterhead and then print as needed, unless there's a larger project. So yeah, not to belabor the point, but I think those are.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think also, so I've been using electronic letterhead for a long time as well, but sometimes you do need hard copies of things. And so like in my estimation, like we should have blank letterhead paper at because the letterhead used to have like a watermark on it as well. So if we were to print something, you could use the electronic letterhead and print it onto that kind of like letterhead paper, if you will. So the letterhead paper would be something that the Board of Aldermen would supply because it wouldn't have any particular alderperson's name or what have you on it. And then so I guess like with the changes in technology, with the changes in the budget, with the changes at the board, those are definitely things that I feel like we probably should talk through a little bit as well. I had one other question, but I'm drawing a blank. So, Madam President, it might come back to me, please, because I have to remember what my other question was. But thank you.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, any questions? Alderman Aldrich, any questions?
I would just say my question, and I remember bringing this up way back when we talked about this originally, is what it looks like for a blackout period. So when Alder people cannot use multi-graph because an election is happening on the state level, we had a blackout period of like 5 months where we couldn't send anything out. Even if it's not campaign related, it could be looked and perceived as campaigning on the city end if you're sending out a good neighbor guide 2 months right before throughout your whole ward before election. So I would like for us to figure out what that looks like, having a policy for a blackout period for when all the people are up for election. But that's my only question, and listening to Alderman Cohen on some of the items that you guys have purchased in the past of what would be board and what can come from our budget.
Yeah, I think it's worth discussing a policy for that. I think that we also probably need to get, figure out a kind of, if we're giving advisement to older people on this, a list of like, these are the things that are inherently like a part of your job that the board pays for. And these are the, list of things that you would need to pay for out of your own printing and mailing account.
Yeah. Like business cards, I don't think that it should come out of an individual alderman account, or maybe you do like a fixed number, like everyone is provided, automatically 500 business cards, a box of business cards. But then after that, if they wanted more, they would have to print it on their own per session or per fiscal year, whatever, however we determine that. But, I think some of those things should just be like right off the bat, we're going to give you X amount from the board's budget. But if you want more, then, you would pay for it out of your account for whatever fiscal year or session or however we determine that.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't get off mute. I'm trying to work off my phone earlier when you came to me, but most of my questions were asked with Alderman Cone. I didn't think about what Alderman Aldridge said until he brought that up, so that's valid. But I don't know if there's a way to look at past averages or past things, and I think that all of us kind of spoke to this in some kind of way. Just responsible practices within our own way that we deal with it. So like for me now, when I get resolutions, I have a folder that I kind of carry back and forth because I get them most of the time get them printed out and framed. So it's a waste for me to have all those paper folders. And honestly, I just now this year, you know, this is my 5th year, I'm just learning how much it really costs to print in those folders per folder, per some of the information I had got from former Alderwoman and Gracia. So with that being said, I think that we might need to form some kind of around that policy, some kind of best practice. We all can play our part in being responsible in this, right? And how we move forward. But I don't want to, I guess I don't want to have it in a way that it hinders one of us from being able to practice whatever we do in our printing and how we communicate, because we all communicate differently with our constituencies. Of course, I don't do as much printing because I'm more online. I'm more sending out messages electronically. That's a personal thing for me. But some people I notice they print out regularly letters and send them out and mail them out regularly on a regular basis. So I just don't know. I know there's a balance. I just don't know it offhand, but I want to make sure, since maybe if there's a way we can use past data to find that balance, I think it would be fair. Otherwise, I think we would absolutely get some pushback from some of our colleagues.
Christine or Ryan, do you have a, sorry.
We can go back. I'm not sure how far back Multigraph tracks the printing. We do have last fiscal year's allocation. Some of the printing includes ward information, some of it doesn't. So I'm not sure how accurate the data will be. I think that's one of the reasons why it's important to do something similar to what we're proposing moving forward, so we do have better data. But if the committee's interested to go back to see what we can piece together from past years, the mailing will be impossible to figure out because individual elected officials were just given stamps before, and there was no tracking of how those were used.
Yeah, I would
Can I-
just piggyback on that historical data on the expenditures are something that we're really lacking on. I think part of that also is a change in administration, you know, a change in leadership at the supply division. I think things might just be a little different now. And so we're trying to establish something like Christina said that we do have good data for going forward.
Alderman Cone, did you have a question?
So I'm just trying to recall, you know, stamps are not in our rules, but we do pass the like board bills at the beginning of session for the expense accounts. And I thought stamps were part of that. Were they not?
They were for a part of the year moving forward between April and July 1st when the new fiscal year started. I know we also, I'm not sure how many, but there were some stamps collected from previous elected officials when they left. Some didn't turn them in, some did. So we do have some actual stamps, and we'll be making sure we have, some stamps on hand. If you're just mailing out like maybe 5 or 10 letters or 1 letter, you won't have to utilize Multigraph. Does that answer the question?
Well, don't we do like at the beginning of session, we do the resolutions adopting our rules and the resolutions adopting the expense accounts for the alderpersons. And then I thought we did a resolution for stamps specifically. So I just want to make sure that we're kind of in compliance with the resolutions that we passed at the beginning of session as well.
You passed a resolution that included stamps for the period of time in between last fiscal year, so April, whatever the first day of session was, through the end of June. I believe, I could be incorrect, it was only for new elected officials so that they had stamps. And then July 1st moving forward, we are no longer purchasing stamps. That money is sitting at Multigraph right now for under internal services, $114,000.
And then, so if it's sitting at Multigraph, is Multigraph, do they have the like automated stamp where you pay for weight of postage versus, 54 cents a stamp type of a thing? So a standard letter will cost you, and I'm just making this up, at 32 cents versus 54 cents going out for like bulk mail or what have you.
It will be much cheaper to mail through Multigraph. They use pre-sort. So
Okay.
this is the metered mail.
I think it's a little closer to 40 cents, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. And then I guess lastly, since we're kind of, switching over to this new model, how do we deal with reconciliation of accounts at the end of the year? So if someone hasn't spent their money, because, I mean, typically like with Ward Capital, if you haven't spent the money, then it just rolls over into the next fiscal year. Are we kind of setting it up in the comptroller system so that these are like ward accounts and they'll be managed accordingly? And so if like me as third ward alderperson only uses half of my allocation this year and then kind of reserves the balance of that for next year or the year after or what have you, how is that being managed? Or are we just going to pool all of the money at the end of the year and give it back to the budget director, or reallocate it within the Board of Aldermen? How are we going to handle money that's unspent at the end of the year?
That's a great question. The comptroller did update the process for elected officials who use the accountable plan a number of years ago, and you cannot roll over money any longer from fiscal year to fiscal year. And so I think the committee could make a decision about how they would like to handle it. I think it would be fair for members of the staff to maybe check in with individual elected officials at some point in time during the fiscal year to let them know that that money is available, but it has to be spent by whatever date before the end of the previous fiscal year, or it will be reallocated for the next fiscal year budget.
But this is different than like an expense account, whereas, an expense account is for, I mean, obviously like business expenses and things of that nature, but let's say someone does want to, and I know, the president has mentioned in the past that, the ultimate goal is to be able to do at least one ward-wide mailing, for each alderperson. But for those that might want to do 2 ward-wide mailings and they want to like save their funds to be able to do that, because, and some, people in the not so distant past used to save stamps in order to like do those types of things. I think that there needs to be a way for an alderperson, if they want to do more mailings, to be able to like save those funds to be able to plan for that.
If I could just jump in, just sort of from an overall budget perspective, I think that's just something that's just not allowed with general funds. I think if elected officials were allowed to do that before, it was an exception at that time, because I don't think any other department can save. So encumbrances for the following year are generally only reserved for a contracted service, right? If you have a contract that's out there that hasn't been paid for. But I can't imagine, it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where general funds are kept from year to year for a charge like this. I think you'd get
I mean, Ward Capital, it happens all the time.
Yeah, not general fund. Yeah, they're just that different because of the funds.
Yeah. So you're saying because these funds specifically come out of the general fund? I mean,
yes.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, technically Ward Capital would come out of the general fund. I know it has its own like tax stream that's associated with it, but okay.
Not my rule.
No, I'm just asking the question so I have an understanding so that we can explain it to our colleagues when we're, having this discussion before the full board. So, because I'm sure those questions will come up.
I could probably get a comment, like a more succinct, an official sort of comment from the budget director on that issue. Perhaps just everyone too.
I don't have, a particular position one way or the other on it. I mean, if it's use it or lose it, fine by me. If it's, roll it over, fine by me. I don't care one way or the other. I just want to be able to be able to communicate it to the other members of the board. And just, I want to be able to have answers for folks, when these things come up. So, and if that's something that we also have to have a discussion as a leadership team about so that we can, either create, a process or policy around it, so be it as well. But just helpful to kind of know where things are so that we can plan accordingly.
So my recommendation, if the rest of the committee would be okay with this, can we pause on this discussion for 1 week and we can come back next week with kind of proposed buckets for what we think like the board should cover versus what needs to be covered through individual accounts. So when we vote on this overall policy, we're able to provide that direction to alder people.
I would be fine with that.
I'm
Okay.
definitely good with that.
Me
Okay.
too.
And Madam President,
Yes.
perhaps, so there's not as much to go over when we reconvene. Do you maybe want me to go ahead and step through the sheet, the Google sheet to how it's presented? Or if you don't
Yeah.
think that kind of detail will be necessary next time, we can skip it too.
No, go right ahead and do that.
Okay. So I'm going to show you all the Google sheet that I set up for tracking of this. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Okay, do you see my Google sheet?
Yes, it needs to be bigger, at least
Okay.
on my screen.
Uh-huh.
No, I blew it up. It's better.
Okay.
That I
Is this
can
okay,
read.
everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So at the beginning here, so this is the summary page that pulls the data from all of these other pages. As Christine mentioned, the line item was 114,000. And then I checked though, because also coming out of this account are the periodic inter-office mailings that we might send to the building division or something. Those charges don't amount to much. I reviewed last fiscal year's charges, and those are right here to come up with. So last year it was like $420. I rounded up a little bit to arrive at a figure of approximately $525 to reserve for inter-office mail. So the effect that had, it would take the budget of 7,600 to 7,565. And then the 20,000 for multi-graph, that translates into 1,333 approximately. And then so the way it'll be entered, so just for example, we'll go to Ward 3. If you entered a request for, let's see, a town hall flyer announcement to be mailed out, 150 here, 300 here, you got 450. These will total, I left about 24 spots here. I wasn't sure how many jobs there would be each year, but rows can be added pretty easily. So all of these come down here, total down here. This box will always be the cumulative spending for this ward. And then when you come back up here to the summary for Ward 3, you can see here that amount has came out of both of these. And then I'm also asking, just for tracking purposes, that whenever one of the secretaries or clerks enter an amount in one of the wards, that you just come in here, put today's date. And then the cool thing about this on Google Sheets is that you can go back in and double check to see who did that. If there's ever a problem with accuracy or updating or whatever, it makes the sheet sort of auditable. And so I'll just
Hey, Ryan,
yeah.
can you go back into Ward 3 and remove that expenditure? I don't need you playing around with Ward 3 funds.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Anyway, so that's the end of the short presentation. Pretty straightforward. And then as the inter-office mail, we get notices from Multigraph quarterly. And so when those come in, I'll just be updating those over here. And yeah, not the most breakthrough technology here, but I think it'll work for our purposes.
And then when you got those updates from Multigraph quarterly, would you then send that over to each alder person to let them know?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, they come to Tracy and well, so I mean, it's not on a per ward data. Yeah, anyone that wants to see those, they're, you know, $100 or a couple $100 per quarter. Anyone that would like to see them is certainly welcome to see them. And if it's the pleasure of the committee that they're just sent out automatically when they come in, we could do that for sure.
Okay. I think that would be good, just so folks are aware of what they have left in their budgets.
Sure. Right. Well, so sort of so that mail tracking I was talking about is one that's not identified by ward. And so it's just the overall amount, right, that's accounted for in this line right here.
Okay, and
So
okay,
that spending won't affect, I mean, we'll want to keep an eye on it to make sure we don't, you know, blow that number out, because then that would leave more for these. But I'm pretty comfortable, you know, we just don't spend much there. So.
right. Okay, so they're not sending quarterly reports for each ward.
No, exactly. No, they basically, I won't say refuse, but no, they don't have the capacity to track it like that. So that's really why we have to do what we're doing.
Okay,
It's by department.
okay,
It's not by ward.
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, the report that we get from Multigraph actually shows the spending on interoffice mail for every department.
okay,
We're just one small line at the top of
all right.
it.
That, I think that helps bring a little bit more clarity. So over the next week, why don't we work to get together a proposed list of items that should just be paid for by the board versus what should have to come out of individual accounts. And then if at next Thursday's regularly scheduled personnel committee time, we could bring that forth, and then hopefully at that time vote on this full plan, and then have information to be able to give out to all Alder people about how this works. Does that sound like a plan? All right.
Yeah, I'm happy to work with Ryan on that. I'll send him a message today and we can gather some more information to present next week.
Okay. And Tracy, if you could go ahead and schedule a meeting for next Thursday at a regularly scheduled time to continue this conversation.
So noted.
Are there any announcements from members of the committee? Seeing none and all members are present, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will continue this conversation next Thursday.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.